Thursday, February 27th. This is CS 746. We're going to do a lab on visualizations today. Short discussion of some other things around visualizations that I put together while we're waiting for files to download and stuff. There. So the visualizations we're going to do today in the lab is going to be messing around with PowerBI. The cool thing about PowerBI is an app that was developed for people who are not data scientists or like data analysts or managers or project leaders at companies or something like that. Microsoft very focused on doing software for companies to do things with, right? So they try to make it easy with an intuitive user interface for people to be able to do charts and graphs and stuff like that. There are things you cannot do in Microsoft Power BI. But there are some great things. And of course, BI stands for business intelligence. Again, this whole ecosystem they've created of power tools is out there for primarily for business, but Wichita State University also has a license with this. So all these tools that ordinarily, if you were out on your own, would be expensive to run are actually free as long as your student's here. So we're going to try to go through that. We'll also go through, as the course of the lab goes through and we're waiting on things, or at the end if I get everything done quickly, I've got a quick PowerPoint where I go through some of the options you have for doing graphs and charts in Python and other programming languages too, because of course you don't just do data science in Python, right? Some companies say that R is the greatest language out there. Other people say that MATLAB is a wonderful programming language. Those are the companies that have lots of money and are willing to send all the money to MathWorks, like the US government. A student yesterday was talking about how the US government has all these contracts with MATLAB, and like you will see if we're spending all that money wisely or not. Huh? Anyhow, so in order to get Power BI, the first thing we're going to do is go to Power BI and say Power BI download. If you have a Windows box, this is great. You go download Power BI, download PBI desktop, and I hope you're gonna all, those of you on PCs, will take a moment to go along and do this with me here. It pops open on the other screen. Here's a window of the with the Microsoft app. So we just say get, and it will start downloading that to our desktop. While we're downloading Power BI, if you have a MacBook, you have a slight problem because there is no native Mac version of Power BI. But what you can do is go to the Power BI app, which is at app.powerbi.com. And this is an online, I need the history up there. This is an online interface to Power BI. And we can do basically everything that we need to on there. So you go to home, we go create, build a report. We can say I want to do a comma separated values file. We go out there and look in our upload file. I've got a file over here which I need to download off of Blackboard. The file we're going to use, just to make sure we're clear on this, is actually a US government available file. You can go out and find it at data.gov. This is a website where the US government, as they collect public records data, they will go ahead and share a lot of it out here on data.gov. We can look at some of our most viewed data sets, and we've looked at a couple of these over the years: electric vehicle population, air quality. But the one we're looking at for now is the FDIC failed bank list. Right here, we click on that, and we can download it as here. And this is when a bank fails, the U.S. government, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, closes that bank down, takes their assets, gives it to another bank, sells it to another bank for considerations, and keeps people's deposits safe. So here's our failed bank list. It's a CSV, so they're presenting the whole thing to us, but we want to download that right here. So we'll go ahead and download it as, it's going to come down as download data. Previous years, the file would come down with the name banklist.csv. So I went ahead and saved the bank list out there in case you're not able to access data.gov, in case we were having problems with it. So it's there on Blackboard if you want it, or you can just go ahead and download it from data.gov. So there's our two things we're going to download today. Power Business Intelligence Desktop, which has finished installing and is ready to open now. So I guess I'm going to take a moment and say, go ahead and get Power BI Desktop so you can follow along. If you're on a MacBook, go ahead and go to app.powerbi.com and grab your file. Here's our data that we just downloaded. So I can drag that file into the app online, or we can go to the, okay, logging in locally, we have to go ahead and give it our credentials. So here is the Power BI desktop application. We can see that there's a few differences, but it's largely very similar to the online interface. And we can load up our Excel workbook in both places. We don't care about dark mode. It thinks that's a wonderful thing. It wants to tell us about it. We go to our downloads. Of course, we can't see it because we told it to load Excel spreadsheets, but the Excel parser is able to handle comma-separated values files. So there's our file connecting, downloaded. Again, going back to our Power BI Online. We've got our data downloaded. We'll see if there's any differences between them, shall we? So here's the preview of the file. In the online version, the preview of the file in the Power BI desktop is the same thing. How many people have got Power BI downloaded yet? One? Anybody else? And so go ahead and take the time to go download Power BI and just go to Power BI download and go get the data.gov or download the data from Blackboard, one or the other. While you're doing that, I'm going to stop here before I do anything with the data, and I'm going to go randomly talk about Python stuff for a few minutes whilst you're downloading Power BI. And as you get Power BI downloaded and installed, or get to the app is actually quicker to start with. So if you prefer to just go app.powerbi.com, that is perfectly fine. There's the app.powerbi.com is the URL for that. Okay. But while we're going and getting that stuff, so we just got to the point in the lab where I suggested people go ahead and download Power BI off the internet and install that on your laptop, or go to the app.powerbi.com website, or you can do it online. Okay. So while you are doing that, let's go ahead and take a moment to look at some of our slides for waiting. While we're waiting for your software to download, to install, to load up the data file, right? I'm going to go ahead and do a quick run through of some data visualization tools or Python that you might find more useful in your project. Power BI is great for doing standalone stuff. You can see it's got some integration with Python, but Power BI doesn't run inside Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook. If you want to do stuff in Jupyter Notebook, here's some tools. And I was lazy. I went to geeksforgeeks.org. I actually went to Google and I said, give me the top Python libraries for data visualization. And it gave me a list of 8. And of course, the AI is out there trying to give me the advice too. But we can go to this web page and it's all in there. And they're talking about these are the most used ones. And interestingly enough, by the time we get down too far on the list, some of the usage statistics get pretty small. The biggest one, of course, is Matplotlib. Matplotlib is the granddaddy of all these tools. It was originally released in 2003. Very powerful, very mature software. As people say in the other packages, the user interface is not particularly intuitive to program in Matplotlib. It's possible to do it, but there's better interfaces to it. But it's still out there, very popular. One of the reasons is Seaborn, down here in number 3, is actually built on top of Matplotlib. So anybody who's using Seaborn is actually using Matplotlib. So if they're looking at usage numbers, this is a built-in, boost for Matplotlib. The Seaborn, as we can see here, was not released until 2014, a good more 10 years after Matplotlib. Plotly is another popular one. Plotly is designed for interactive online graphics. So if you want to be doing some things here, we won't do that yet right now. If you want to do interactive and animated options, Plotly is a good option to do. So if you have a web page that you're trying to develop, that's a great way to do it. After Seaborn comes what's called ggplot or Plot9. It's for R lovers. This was a piece of software originally developed in the R programming language for use with R in 2013. And there was a ggplot branch for Python, and that lasted till about 2016, and then they retitled it to Plot9. So I thought for a while that ggplot was dead. It's not. It just got renamed. What does GG stand for? Grammar of Graphics. Altair Vega is another tool, started in 2016, still active. It is focused on the grammar of graphics. Bokeh is focused on interactive, colorful graphics. It's kind of closer to the Microsoft Power BI stuff, but using a programming interface. And it also uses grammar of graphics. Seaborn uses the grammar of graphics. PyGal is a package that was developed to be able to do scalable vector graphics. SVG, of course, is, as you expand a GIF file or something, it eventually turns into pixels. As you expand an SVG, it always stays because it's got actual entities in there. So it's instead of drawing an arrow with pixels, it's actually got coordinates of where the arrow starts and ends and descriptors about that. So it's kind of a description language. And finally, down at the bottom, yes, you need to be able to do geographical plots. We'll see that in Power BI here in a minute when we get to it. But you can also see that this package was developed in 2015, maintained for a year, and nothing much has happened to it for the last 9 years. Why? Probably because it doesn't change much, or maybe it's because people don't really use all that much geographical plotting, because there are graphical or geographic information systems out there. Let's see. How many people have Power BI installed now? Okay, a bunch of you. How many people have the data file downloaded? Excellent. Okay, so we're ready to go. Before I jump into that, I'm going to say that the grammar of graphics actually refers to a book. And I went to the ABWA library and checked out the book. And we'll talk about this later on when we talk about what is good graphics. What do good charts look like? And on this slide, you'll see that there's a, what's that? Okay, yeah, you'll see that there's a link here to one of the most well-known historical statistical graphs ever drawn, of course, according to author Edward Tufte. So we'll see that in a bit. This is back in the 1800s, the guy drew this chart, and it's still held up as a model for everyone. All right, we're going to leave that in the background. We're going to go over here to our Power BI Where to go? Power BI app. All right. So you go ahead and you load the data into Power BI. It's just like Excel, where if you're reading a comma separated values file, it's going to try to impute the type of the data columns. It's going to read, like Python, it's got other data sources it can read from. Some of them, like an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database, for instance, it knows already because that's all part of the schema. Other ones, it's got to guess. And so if we go ahead and say, let me say, transform the data, right? And this will bring up what we call the Power Query Editor. We could just say, click on and say, go to the next step, right? Or we could come down here and say, tell me what you did. And it says, this is what I did. I said the bank name is a text column, the city is a text column, so on and so forth. The cert, I'm going to say, is an integer. Closing date is a type date. And the fund number, this is where the dollars came from. To be able to bail out that bank is also an integer. So they're saying, is this looking good? And we're saying, yeah, that looks pretty good. Once we're happy with it, and you can see it's actually got little icons up here to shorthand tell us 1, 2, 3, ABC, a picture of a calendar, so on and so forth. So if that's great, we say go ahead and close and apply. We've now brought the data into Power BI. We can do the same thing on our app here. Just in this case, we'll just be lazy. We'll just say create. We don't have to do anything. And it's going to take longer because it's out there online doing things remotely. So go ahead and get your data loaded in here. And I can take the data over here. I've got four panes, basically. I've got the data area, the work area where things are being displayed. I've got a filters pane. I've got a visualizations pane. I've got a data pane. Over here on the left, I've got the charting or the report view. I can look at a table view, or I can just say, show me my data as the tabular format. I can look at it as a database. And so this is actually what Microsoft calls a snowflake database, because I guess they're special. That was a joke. Anyhow, this is like a star database where they've got a central fact table. They've arranged all this in what they say is a nice, efficient representation, but it's not an Excel spreadsheet is the point. When you're in Power BI, you're actually working with a database, underlying stuff. Finally, there's this DAX thing, which we're not even going to look at. So there's our 4 things we can do with the data if we want to start messing around with it, depending on how we want to look at it. Let's go ahead and go to the report view. Open our data up. How many people are with me? Yes. Yeah, and we'll go back to the online one, see what we're doing. Yeah. So this is the online one. I've uploaded the data by doing a drag and drop. Yes. Yes. Okay, where are we at here? Hold on a second. Right. Yeah. I don't know if another web browser. Yeah, I'm doing stuff on Chrome. It's got the standardized interface. It probably is a Safari versus Chrome thing, but there's more security in Safari because Apple's big on security. So we don't have to get stuff done today. We'll have time to finish this up if we need to later. So you can, try. Do you have Chrome? Firefox, that should work. Yeah. Okay. Do you have Chrome, or do you try it? Oh, okay. Windows Virtual Machine. That's a good way to do it too. Yeah, yeah. What'd you say we're using for that? Doing? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm more familiar with the virtual machines that run on Windows and bring you something else. Yeah. Yes. They are slightly different. It's just more data in the FDIC one, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The FDIC one yeah, because banks are still continuing to fail once in a while. Although if you look at the data, yeah. So I'm going to say pick whichever one you want to. I went ahead and yesterday I used the data from last year. This lecture today, I downloaded the download data that came off of data.gov today. So if you've got that loaded, we go ahead and open up our download data, and we can see that all the columns are listed over here. The date has been parsed out into a date hierarchy with years, quarters, months, and days listed. Let's go ahead and just click on the state. And when we click on the state, it populates in here in the visualizations what data we're going to use. We can drag the state in to be the legend. And we'll have, well, let's go ahead and delete that first. Make this bigger. So this is the default thing. It sees I got a list of states. So it says, oh, states, I'll be helpful. You must want geographic data, right? And so it's going to show all the states that have had bank failures in the data file, right? North Dakota and Montana still haven't had any bank failures. I thought Alaska had had one. Maybe not. The amusing thing here, there's a bank failure down here in the state of Paraná, Brazil. Can you imagine where that bank failure was at? That was in Puerto Rico, which is officially a territory of the United States. And, you know, bank failures in Puerto Rico are managed by the FDIC, just like in any other US state and territory. And Microsoft went out there, little glitch in the program. They're trying to look for a state named PR, and they found one, only it's not what we expected it to be. So this is a default. Well, we don't want to look at that really. We want to look at, you know, give me some information, interesting information about maybe how many bank failures there are by state. So let's go ahead and click on, we'll call it here, this is a ring chart. Well, there's nothing there. And here's a pie chart, nothing there, right? What is a ring? It's called a donut chart, I'm sorry. A donut chart is a pie chart with a central hole cut out, right? Because Microsoft says it's more aesthetic not to have all those points coming together. You notice this only has the legend on it, right? In the visualizations, we have to have the legends and we have to have something that we're going to graph. So legends are great. Automatic population. Well, let's go ahead and say, throw me up what the data is. And there we go. We have a nice graph. So it's immediately drawn us a graph. We can start hovering over these. We see the count of the states, right? Find Kansas over here sometime, right? Well, this is interesting. What if we only want to look for states that had more than 10 failures or something? We want to look at the smaller failures, less than 10 failures, right? What happens if we apply that filter? We get it where the largest one is Ohio with 9 failures, and then we can get a bigger read on the smaller number, right? Or we can say is greater than 10 and apply that. And we'll only get the big states, right? There's still a fair number of them. Or we can delete that filter. Maybe come over here and filters on this visual. And so when we see up here, we're seeing there's filters on the visual, and then there's filters on the page, and filters on all pages. We're doing kind of a project thing here, right? So we can apply our filters globally, locally, or as it were, individually. So here we're going to go ahead and take the filter on the closing date, and we can go ahead and say, show the date when the year is less than 2007, for instance, right? You need notice here the biggest number is Georgia with 93 failures. We apply the filter. And now our biggest number is Florida with only 3. So before 2007, there weren't a whole lot of bank failures, right? So we can just mess around with the things here. Another thing we can maybe do a ribbon chart. Well, this is not so great because when we go to the ribbon chart, it's got the x-axis of the state, the y-axis is the count of state. Why don't we go ahead and try to make the x-axis be the year? And I can literally put 2 different things in the axis, right? And I'm sorry, on there. And the legend down here is closing date by year. And I've got state in here. I don't want that in there anymore, so I can just delete it, right? I can go ahead and say on the y-axis, we're going to do count of state. We can then go, and we need to turn off our filters. There. And now we see a filter. It's a nice colorful chart. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for x-axis closing date, count of state. Go ahead and delete that. There we go. Now we got a standard ribbon chart. It's going to work now. Hang on. There we go. Okay, we just went the wrong direction. And if I say now, use in the legend, use the state. So now it's going to color everything by different states. And this is a kind of an interesting kind of a graph now, because this is actually the total count of bank failures by each year. You can see in 2010, there were over 150 bank failures. Most years, there's a few, right? Some small numbers, digits. Anybody know what happened in this time frame, 2009, 2010? That was the 2008 financial crisis, where someone back here in the early 2000s invented this wonderful new instrument of investment instrument called the CDO squared. And they said it was perfectly safe, and they lied, and it was not. And it blew up in everybody's face in 2008. And all these banks went belly under, and all these people lost their houses because some joker had, defrauded us about how safe their investment was, right? So anyhow, so there's all these different visualizations you can do here, stack bar charts. And some of them don't make sense with the data we've got. Some of them are just like useless, right? For instance, if I go out here and clear everything and go to back to a pie chart, closing date and year, well, that's a mess right there. If I delete everything off of here and just say, maybe I'll graph the bank name, right? And I'll put the bank name in as the values as well. Bank name for the legend. That is a useless chart, right? So obviously it's just unreadable there, because every single bank has a different name. So you can make garbage in Power BI just like in any visualization thing. So for the lab, what I want you to do, those of you who have things up and running, you can use the data set that we got from data.gov on bank failures and find a good visualization that looks interesting. Once you've got a useful, good-looking visualization, if you'd rather go use the IRIS data set or use your project data set, assuming you don't have a massive one or a matplotlib data set, it is possible to get your MATLAB.mat. It is possible to get .mat files into Power BI. It's not directly supported. You actually have to go to MathWorks, and they have a tool to export the .mat file into a format that Power BI will read in, right? So when you've got in that ecosystem with the .mat file is a company that charges a lot of money for it. They've got the other people don't really work with them as well, which is unfortunate because it's a powerful tool. But once you get past that, everything just worked cleanly again. So go ahead and try looking at some of these things. See if you can do this. Maybe a closing by date, and look at your ring chart is a nice simple visualization you can try to do. We actually chart the year of the failures, right? That's a simple ring chart that you could do, or donut chart. Gauges, cards. Down here in our data, we have eventually. Online. I'm on the online one. No wonder. Okay. If I go to my Power BI desktop, here we go. You can see there's a .py or py icon, and I can actually go out there and turn on scripting in here and, build a visualization in Python using, say, Jupyter Notebook, and then copy paste it right into Power BI. Have I tried that yet? No, I'm not expert. I'm just showing you this tool exists for you to mess around with it. And R, if you're a R fan. And I knew a guy that was a huge fan of R back in the day, and I can't gainsay him. I just didn't want to bother learning one more programming language at that time. So it's a straightforward language. It's a little bit funkier syntax than Python, because everything has a funkier syntax than Python. Python has got the cleanest syntax, most understandable, basically, I think, of any programming language I've seen. Lisp is the one with the worst syntax. Yeah. Anyhow, so that's that. I'll let you go on to this. Before I finish up, though, I'm going to go back to my slideshow here. Finish up just our brief reference to this whole grammar of graphics thing. Back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, object-oriented programming language came along. And before that, everybody was doing procedural programming. They'd write functions. They'd say, tell the computer, do one thing, do one thing, do one thing, one after another, right? Object-oriented programming was about saying we're going to look at something as a thing. We're going to think of this, chart as a thing that you can interact with. It has methods that you can apply to it. Just like, a door has a handle on it. You don't go out there and, tell the door procedurally how to do it. You just intuitively know how to do it, right? And the idea of object-oriented programming was to make it easier to program, easier for other people to use your libraries if you develop with it. This fella here, Leland Wilkinson, in the course of the 1990s, said that graphics, how to do graphics right, can be amenable to this whole object-oriented programming paradigm. So he wrote this book. It was published first in 1999. And then this is a second edition from 2005, in which he really expanded it, put a lot of stuff in it, and basically provided object-oriented, intuitive framework for graphics. Right? The cover of his first edition had the picture of this famous map on it. This is described by Edward Tufte, who's an author of several popular books on statistics and graphing, as the probably the best statistical graph ever done. The fellow it did was a fellow named Charles Minard, who was born 1781, died by 1870, and he talked about Napoleon's invasion of France. And on this chart, you can see he's got 6 different things that he's showing. He's showing a map. He's showing the size of Napoleon's army marching to Moscow. So many of his soldiers freezing. This is the temperature scale on the bottom. You can see all these losses that happened here as they were trying to march across eastern Russia and the Lithuania here. And people were freezing to death. By the time he finally got to Moscow, his 400,000 troops had declined to 100,000. So he'd lost 3/4 of his troops, not to battles, but to frostbite and starvation and stuff. Complete disaster. Never invade Russia in the winter, right? And then he came back and he had this 10,000 people at the end. Lost over 400,000 soldiers on that disastrous campaign, which is thought-provoking. Don't get into a winter battle in Russia there, right there, yeah. But at the same time, and he's got, I forget what all the other dimensions are, but this is actually discussed in, if you look at the Wikipedia article on that image, or in any of Edward Tufte's things. Do I expect your graphs to look like this? Absolutely. No, I don't. Just this is, kind of an example that people throw out there, and it's worth looking at, of, the importance of good visualizations, the incredible power that you can have with a properly drawn one. And so in your work going forward, and possibly in your project this semester, you'll want to be using some good visualizations. And Power BI is a good way to simply make some simple, quick visualizations that you don't have to do programmatically. If you do it programmatically in Python using some of these packages, again, Seaborn is what we're already using. There's other packages depending on what particular thing you want to focus on that can give you really great interactive graphics or mapping, things like that. Powerful tools, keep those in the back of your head. A side point is that Wichita State University data science program has traditionally been run on Python using graphics packages. We're trying to incorporate more of things like Power BI into the package, because as a data scientist, you need to use, all the tools that are available, not just say, I'm going to be stuck up and only use the difficult ones, right? So that's why we wanted you to learn Power BI. So go ahead and get a visualization together in the whatever time we have remaining. I'm going to create a small homework, and you can use that to upload whatever visualization you make. Just the simple way to do it is take a screenshot, crop it, shove it up in as your submission. Single point, just to show you've been here for the lab. Now, I'm actually going to let you cheat on this. I'm going to make the due date be tomorrow midnight. So you don't have to do it right now. If you have stuff to do and you want to take off, that's fine. We'll count you as having attended as long as you get some visualization that you've made uploaded. And again, Power BI, is that browser working for you in Firefox? What's that? Working. All right. We could suggest going to one of the labs over here down the south end of Jabara Hall and try and get in one of the Windows boxes they have there briefly. So otherwise, I will keep inspecting that. I will look into that and see why it's not working. Ajay, have you got it up and running in your app.powerbi.com? We'll get the professor on it. Yeah. Okay. Any questions before I turn off the recording? Seeing no questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and we'll get this posted for people to reference